In the middle of the 19th century, the air outside the Kew Palm House was freezing and choked with the industrial soot of London. But just millimeters away, on the other side of the glass, palm trees were growing in a thriving tropical rainforest. Inside these structures, Victorian visitors walked across heated decorative tiles and were surrounded by dense collections of exotic potted plants. They were standing in a carefully engineered microclimate, flooded with light and heavy with humidity. This severe boundary between the damp warmth of the tropics and the freezing English winter was maintained by a transparent glass veil, dripping with the heavy condensation of trapped internal moisture. A Victorian glasshouse functions as a precision-engineered thermodynamic trap built to seize solar energy and hold it in place against the natural environment. Prior to the 19th century, sheltering exotic citrus and tropical plants required a much heavier approach. Estates relied on orangeries, permanent brick and masonry buildings designed to provide winter protection. Buildings like the Ham House Orangery relied on thick, solid stone walls. This heavy construction acted as a thermal mass to insulate the plants from the cold, but it severely restricted the amount of sunlight that could enter the room. These buildings were conservatories in the most literal sense of the word. They were masonry bunkers where delicate green plants were conserved or overwintered in near darkness until spring. The shift from thick stone to thin glass marked a transition from passively hiding plants from the cold to actively simulating a warm climate using the power of light. In this cross-section diagram, shortwave visible light passes through the glass barrier. Inside, dark soil and leaves absorb the energy, re-emitting it as long-wave infrared heat. The glass is opaque to these longer wavelengths, so the heat bounces back, unable to escape. By trapping this thermal radiation and providing a physical roof to block warm air from mixing with the cold winds outside, the structure maintains a stable, elevated temperature. To scale these microscopic physics into massive, towering environments, Victorian engineers needed a material both incredibly strong and incredibly thin. They found it in iron. Architects borrowed directly from the shipbuilding industry. They took wrought iron deck beams, welded them into 42-foot lengths, and bent them to create a lightweight, self-supporting skeleton capable of holding thousands of panes of glass. Because of these nautical engineering techniques, the resulting architecture was entirely curvilinear. The Kew Palm House physically resembles the bulbous hull of an upturned ship. Keeping that massive volume of air warm through the winter required 12 basement boilers. But to ensure chimney smoke wouldn't coat the glass in soot and block the sunlight, engineers built a 150-meter underground tunnel to vent the exhaust to a distant bell tower. These sprawling cathedrals of glass were highly complex industrial machines, operating around the clock to sustain a pristine, artificial version of nature. In 1829, a London physician named Nathaniel Bagshaw Ward accidentally discovered that a fern could thrive inside a tightly sealed glass jar, perfectly insulated from the city's toxic pollution. Ward realized the sealed glass created a self-sustaining cycle where moisture constantly condensed and evaporated. He scaled this concept into a portable, wooden-framed indoor greenhouse, which became known as the Wardian case. Previously, shipping delicate tropical plants across the ocean was nearly impossible due to freezing temperatures and salt spray. Inside these sealed cases, plants generated their own humid microclimates and survived months at sea. By miniaturizing the exact thermodynamic system used in massive conservatories, the Wardian case made foreign climates completely portable. Lashed to the open decks of merchant ships to catch the sunlight, these cases became the primary infrastructure for a global migration of plants. British operatives used Wardian cases to smuggle 20,000 tea plants out of China to establish plantations in India. A few decades later, they used them to transfer South American rubber trees into Malaya. By successfully relocating these highly lucrative crops to their own colonial territories, The British Empire broke centuries-old geographic monopolies and completely rewired the global economy. The ability to transport a functioning climate in a wooden box turned the practice of botany into a highly effective weapon of imperial expansion. European scientific institutions recorded these plant transfers as acts of botanical discovery. But in the Andes Mountains, indigenous communities already possessed generations of knowledge regarding the quinoquina tree and its ability to treat malaria. British agents extracted the tree and shipped it to Kew Gardens. There, botanists absorbed it into the Linnaean taxonomic system, officially renaming it Cinchona securubra. The Linnaean taxonomic system is a hierarchical scientific framework used to classify and assign Latin names to organisms globally. The strategic goal behind this classification was mass production. By cultivating the bark to produce quinine on an industrial scale, European soldiers and administrators could survive in malaria-prone regions and push their borders further inland. By taking the physical plant, domesticating it inside a glasshouse, and assigning it a Latin name, the empire systematically claimed ownership over centuries of indigenous medical knowledge. The 19th century greenhouse is a fascinating structural paradox. By arranging fragile sheets of glass and thin iron rods into a thermodynamic trap, botanists managed to redraw the economic map of the world. The modern era was shaped by military logistics and political borders, but it was equally built on the quiet, industrial mastery of catching and holding on to the warmth of the sun.